The alien bar was full of smoke, noise, and the smell of cheap fuel. Strange lights blinked above the counter. Beings from 10 different worlds sat together drinking, shouting, and gambling. But one corner of the bar was quiet. A thin alien with gray-green skin and tired red eyes sat alone. His name was Creval. His hands trembled as he held a small metal cup. In front of him stood a bartender, a fat creature with 4 arms and a cruel grin. Creval's voice broke as he said, "One more drink." "Please," the bartender laughed. "No more credit, Creval. You already owe me too much." Creval's eyes darted to the side. Behind him, hidden in the shadows, were 3 small alien children, frightened, weak, and shaking from hunger. They were his own children. Their skin glowed faintly blue, a sign of sickness. The bartender looked at them and smirked. "You want that drink so bad, Creval? What will you trade this time?" The whole bar went quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. Creval's lips trembled. He whispered, "Take them. Take them for 1 drink." Gasps filled the room. A few aliens laughed, others cursed. "He's selling his own brood," one shouted. "Disgusting creature," another spat. But no one stopped him. In the back of the bar, sitting quietly with a drink of his own, was a human engineer named Daniel Cross. He had been fixing mining robots for months on this planet, Gorath Prime, a dirty world forgotten by the galaxy. When Daniel heard the alien's words, his chest tightened. He thought he had misheard, but then he saw the bartender toss a glass of amber liquid toward Creval, and the alien drink it in one gulp, shaking with relief. While his children were pushed forward by 2 guards, Daniel couldn't stay seated anymore. He stood up, his boots scraping against the metal floor. The sound echoed through the silence. "Hey!" he shouted. "What the hell is this?" The crowd turned to stare at him. Some laughed when they saw a human. Others muttered, "Outsider should mind his business." Daniel walked to the counter, his face pale with anger. "You're selling kids for a drink? Are you out of your mind?" The bartender leaned closer. "You're in alien space, human. Different laws here." He made a trade. "It's legal." Daniel looked at Creval. The alien sat slumped over, tears running down his face. The children stared at Daniel, their eyes big and glowing faintly. One of them whispered a word he didn't understand, but the fear in the voice said enough. "Legal or not," Daniel said through clenched teeth, "it's wrong." The bartender shrugged. "Then pay for them yourself. 500 credits. Otherwise leave." Daniel didn't even think. He slammed his credit chip on the counter. "Done." The bartender blinked, surprised. The entire bar fell into stunned silence again. Humans were known for being stubborn, but not this stubborn. Creval raised his head slowly. His voice cracked. Why would you do that?" Daniel didn't answer. He only said, "Because someone should." He turned to the children and motioned for them to follow. They hesitated, then stepped closer. Their small feet made no sound on the metal floor. The youngest one clutched Daniel's hand with thin, trembling fingers. As Daniel led them out of the bar, the alien crowd began whispering. Some mocked him, others shook their heads. "The human fool," someone said. "He'll regret this." Outside, the cold air of Gorath Prime bit at their skin. Neon lights flickered across the streets and toxic rain began to fall. Daniel wrapped his jacket around the smallest child and guided them toward his ship, the Arcadia, a small cargo vessel parked near the docks. Inside the ship, Daniel turned on the heater and found food packs. The children sat close together, watching him with wide, curious eyes. They didn't speak his language, but they understood kindness. As they ate slowly, Daniel looked out the window toward the dark sky. He couldn't stop thinking about Creval's face, the despair, the guilt, the emptiness. Why would anyone do that? He whispered to himself. Sell their own children for 1 drink. The youngest alien coughed softly. A faint blue light spread across his chest. Daniel frowned, realizing it wasn't normal. Something was terribly wrong. He didn't know it yet, but what he had done tonight, this small act of compassion, would pull him into a fight far greater than he could imagine. A fight not just for survival, but for hope. And somewhere in that same smoky bar, Creval sat with his drink, staring at the door where the human had left. Tears fell into the glass as he whispered, "Forgive me." Inside the small ship Arcadia, Daniel worked quietly while the 3 alien children sat huddled near the warm air vent. The soft hum of the engine filled the silence. Outside, rain beat against the hull, sounding like 1,000 tiny fists. The children didn't speak his language, but their eyes said everything: fear, confusion, and a tiny spark of hope. The youngest, with glowing blue veins under pale skin, shivered. Daniel quickly wrapped another blanket around him. "It's okay," Daniel said softly, though he knew they couldn't understand. "You're safe now." He handed out small food packs, emergency rations he'd saved for long trips. The eldest child hesitated before taking one, then broke it into pieces and shared with the others. That simple act made Daniel's chest tighten. Even starving, they thought of each other first. He smiled faintly. "Good kids," he whispered. For a few hours, things were calm. Daniel started running scans on them using his ship's medical tools. He expected malnutrition, maybe dehydration. But what he saw made his blood run cold. Their blood readings were unstable, cells dying and regenerating too fast. Their organs showed signs of biocontamination, something engineered, not natural. "What did they do to you?" he murmured. The scanner beeped again. The smallest child's vitals dropped sharply. His breathing slowed. Daniel rushed to grab the medkit. He injected a stabilizer, praying it would help. The child gasped weakly and his glow dimmed. No, stay with me," Daniel whispered, shaking. "You're not dying on me tonight." After a tense few minutes, the child's breathing steadied. Daniel leaned back in relief. His hands were trembling. That's when the ship's AI spoke in its calm female voice. "Warning, unauthorized biological readings detected. Recommend quarantine." "Not now," Daniel muttered. "They're kids, not cargo." The AI paused. "Their condition is not listed in any galactic medical database." Daniel stared at the readout again. It was true. Whatever was inside these children wasn't known. That scared him more than anything. He looked toward the small window where neon lights from the alien city flickered. Somewhere out there, Craval, the father, was still drinking. Daniel's anger flared. He needed answers. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and looked at the children. "Stay here. Lock the door. I'll be back." The eldest tilted his head, worried. Daniel smiled weakly. "I promise." He left the Arcadia and headed into the night. The city streets were slick with rain, filled with neon signs and desperate souls. He found the same smoky bar easily, the only place still awake at this hour. Inside, Craval sat slumped over the counter, half asleep, half drunk. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Wake up." Craval blinked, his eyes red and watery. "You again?" "Human. Yeah, me again," Daniel said coldly. "Those kids you sold, they're dying. What happened to them?" Craval laughed bitterly. "They're dying because of mercy." "Mercy from the Syndicate," Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Craval's voice cracked. "The Syndicate tested a weapon on our planet. Gas that changes our blood. The rich got medicine. The rest of us, nothing. I begged them for help. They said I could trade. Trade anything." He looked down at his shaking hands. I had nothing left but them. Daniel's jaw clenched. His heart twisted with anger and pity. "And you traded them for a drink?" Craval met his eyes. "No, I traded them because I couldn't watch them die." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. The bar around them went quiet again. Even the bartender looked away. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You're a coward, Craval, but I'm not going to let them die." Craval's head dropped into his hands, weeping silently. Daniel turned and walked out, his boots echoing against the wet ground. Back on the Arcadia, the children were still awake, waiting for him. When he entered, their faces lit up with relief. "I'm here," Daniel said softly. "I found out what's wrong with you, and I'm going to fix it." He sat at his console, opening forbidden medical databases, hacking through firewalls he wasn't supposed to touch. Warnings flashed on the screen. "Illegal access detected." He ignored them. The ship's AI spoke again. "Daniel, this is against galactic law." "Yeah," he muttered. "So is letting kids die." He downloaded schematics for a bioengine chamber. Technology meant only for military hospitals. It could rebuild damaged cells, but building one from scrap was dangerous, maybe impossible. Daniel didn't care. He had made his choice. As the night faded into a dull alien sunrise, Daniel worked nonstop, cutting wires, reprogramming nanotech, and whispering promises to the sleeping children. He didn't see himself as a hero. He just couldn't stand by while others suffered. Outside, Craval stumbled into the rain, staring up at the gray sky. He whispered, "Human, save them if you can." Inside the Arcadia, Daniel tightened the last bolt on his machine. It flickered to life with a faint hum. He looked at the children and said quietly, "You've got a chance now, and I'm not stopping until you're safe." He didn't know yet that his small act of defiance had just made him an enemy of the entire galactic syndicate. But for Daniel Cross, one thing was clear: hope had a home again. The Arcadia drifted silently in orbit above Gorath Prime. Inside, Daniel sat at his work table surrounded by glowing screens and tangled wires. The hum of machinery mixed with the soft breathing of the sleeping alien children behind him. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands covered in grease and burns, but his mind was sharp. Every time exhaustion tried to take him, he'd look at the smallest child, the one whose chest still glowed faintly blue, and he'd keep going. He was close. The data from his scanners revealed something terrifying. The infection inside the children wasn't just a disease, it was a weapon. A microscopic parasite created to target a specific alien species. The code embedded in its DNA even had a corporate signature. Property of Galactic Syndicate Bio Division. Daniel leaned back, whispering, "You bastards. You made this." He stared at the flickering hologram of the Syndicate emblem, a circle of cold metal stars. These were the same people who controlled medicine, trade, and every law in the galaxy. They built weapons for wars, then sold the cures for profit. He realized something even worse. The biocode was still transmitting data. Somewhere the Syndicate was tracking these kids. Daniel stood up fast. "Arcadia, jam all outgoing signals." The ship's AI responded, "Jamming initiated." Signal suppression at 97%. However, any further interference will attract Syndicate attention. "I'll take that risk," Daniel said. He looked toward the sleeping children. "You're not their experiment anymore." Just then the eldest child stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, silver and bright. She looked weak but alert. When she saw Daniel, she tried to speak. Her voice was soft, broken, her words strange and heavy with alien sounds. Daniel crouched beside her. "Hey, it's okay. Don't talk too much." She shook her head and touched her chest, then pointed to him. "Why, help?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Because no one else will." She didn't understand all his words, but she understood his tone. She gave a faint smile and whispered something in her own language, something that sounded like hope. That single word hit Daniel hard. He turned back to his screens. He knew what he had to do next. But to build a cure, he needed pure samples. And that meant finding Krival again. The drunk alien might still know where the weapon originated. Daniel hated the thought of seeing him, but time was running out. The next day, he landed near the same rundown bar. It was early morning, but the place was already half full. The smell of fuel and sorrow filled the air. Krival was there, sitting in the same seat, eyes sunken and face gray. He looked older, emptier. Daniel slammed a vial on the counter. Inside it, blue liquid shimmered. "You're going to tell me where this came from?" Krival looked at the vial, then at Daniel. "You should have left them to die." "Not happening," Daniel said coldly. "You said the Syndicate did this." "How?" Krival laughed bitterly. "They came to our planet with promises. Said they'd give us clean air, jobs, medicine. Then the air filters started releasing something else. People began to glow like stars and then they fell." His voice shook. "They said they were testing immunity boosters, but we were just samples." Daniel clenched his fists. "And they kept the cure for themselves," Krival nodded. "Only the rich ones. The rest of us were told to pray." He looked at Daniel, eyes wet. "When I sold them, I told myself they'd at least die faster. I was wrong. You took them instead. Maybe that means something." For the first time, Daniel saw not a monster but a broken father drowning in guilt. He reached into his pocket and placed a small cube on the counter. A data recorder. "Tell me everything you remember." "Every name, every place." Krival hesitated, then nodded. His claws tapped the cube, activating the record. He began to speak, slowly, painfully. As Daniel listened, his anger burned hotter. The Syndicate hadn't just created a weapon. They had sold it, testing it on entire species to see how much suffering the galaxy could ignore. When the recording ended, Krival looked down at his empty hands. "What will you do with it, human?" Daniel picked up the cube. "Expose them. Cure your people. And make them pay." Creval gave a faint, hopeless smile. You'll die trying. Maybe, Daniel said, turning to leave. But at least I'll die doing something right. Back on the Arcadia, Daniel uploaded the data. The ship's AI warned him again. Daniel, the Syndicate will detect this file. Their law forbids unauthorized genetic work. Daniel stared at the screen, his reflection pale in the blue light. Then let them come. He inserted the cube into his console. Lines of alien code streamed across the screen. The truth about the Syndicate's crimes filled his monitors like wildfire. Behind him, the eldest child stood quietly, her small hand resting on the metal wall. She whispered a word Daniel didn't know, but he could guess its meaning. Hope. Again, that same word. And in that moment, Daniel Cross made a promise to the children. To Creval and to himself, he would build the cure. He would fight the Syndicate. And he would prove that one human's compassion could shake the stars. The Arcadia floated in the dark silence of space, far from any known trade routes. Its engines were off. Only the soft blue glow from the ship's lab lights broke the endless black around it. Inside, Daniel Cross stood surrounded by wires, shattered circuits, and glowing vials. His ship looked less like a home now and more like a battlefield of tools and broken laws. For 3 days straight, Daniel had worked on building what no one in the galaxy dared to make, a bioengine chamber, capable of rewriting living cells. It was forbidden by galactic law because it could be used to create life, or destroy it, but Daniel didn't care. The 3 alien children, weak, trembling, and fading, were his only reason to keep going. He looked at the youngest, still lying in the cryo bed. The faint glow under his skin was brighter now, spreading through his veins like fire. Every few minutes his breathing stopped, and started again only because Daniel kept restarting the oxygen flow manually. Daniel's voice was rough from exhaustion. You're not dying on me, kid. Not while I can still fight. He turned back to the chamber, tightening the last power coil. Sparks flew, burning his sleeve. He didn't even flinch. The ship's AI, calm but almost disapproving, spoke again. Daniel, unauthorized genetic engineering is a capital crime under Galactic Law Section 41. The penalty is execution. Daniel grinned weakly. Add that to my list. Your actions could draw Syndicate attention, the AI continued. Good, Daniel said. Let them watch. Maybe they'll finally see what humanity looks like when it cares. He activated the chamber. A low hum filled the air, rising like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Blue energy began to flow through transparent tubes connecting to the child's cryobed. Daniel watched as the reading stabilized, just for a moment. The heart rate rose. The oxygen levels normalized. For the first time in days, the child's breathing was steady. Daniel exhaled in relief. It's working. Then the alarm screamed. Warning, the AI said sharply. Unauthorized power surge detected. External sensors show approaching vessels. Daniel froze. How many? 3 Syndicate patrol ships. They have detected our signature. Daniel's mind raced. They must have traced the data cube. Damn it. He ran to the console and activated the cloaking field, but it flickered. His power was too low. The experiment was draining everything. He stared at the reactor readings. If he shut down the experiment, the child would die. If he didn't, the Syndicate would find him. He looked toward the sleeping kids, then back at the screen. No choice, he said. We finish this first. The ship AI's voice turned urgent. They're within 1 light minute. You cannot hide. Daniel ignored her. He moved from console to console, adjusting the nanotech flow and stabilizing the genetic sequence. His hands were shaking, his body running on pure adrenaline. Outside, the stars began to flash red, signs of approaching ships dropping from warp. Inside the Arcadia, the air was electric. The eldest child had woken up, her eyes wide as she watched Daniel work. Bad? She asked, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded. Bad, but we'll be okay. She walked closer, placing a small, glowing hand on the chamber's glass. The blue light responded to her touch, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Daniel blinked in surprise. The readings jumped. You're syncing with it. He suddenly realized the children's biology wasn't fighting the cure. It was guiding it. The alien DNA had a built-in link to the biostructure. They weren't victims. They were the key. Daniel adjusted the frequencies. That's it. Keep touching the glass. Don't stop. Outside, the Syndicate ships locked on target, A robotic voice echoed across the comms. Unauthorized biological interference detected. Power down and surrender immediately, human vessel. Daniel laughed bitterly. Yeah, not happening. He redirected the power to the engines just enough for a short burst. The chamber's light grew brighter and brighter, until the whole lab looked like the heart of a star. The youngest child gasped, his blue veins fading to normal color. The machine beeped once, then stabilized. The cure was complete. Daniel, the AI said, the process is successful. But we are out of power. He nodded, sweat dripping down his face. Then we fight with what's left. The Arcadia jolted as the Syndicate ships opened fire. Energy blasts hit the outer hull, shaking everything. Alarms screamed. Shields at 20%, the AI warned. Daniel rushed to the cockpit, taking control manually. Hold on, kids! He launched a desperate escape. The ship's small thrusters roared, weaving through the blackness. Blinding light from the enemy weapons followed, striking again and again. He pushed the engines past their limits. Panels sparked, systems failed, but he didn't stop. One of the alien children cried out as the ship spun violently. Daniel gritted his teeth. Almost there. Just a little more. A missile grazed the Arcadia's side, tearing off half a wing. The ship lurched downward, caught in the pull of a nearby asteroid belt. Brace for impact, Daniel shouted. The Arcadia dove into the shadows of the asteroids, disappearing from Syndicate scanners just before a final blast could hit. Silence. Daniel sat back in his chair, chest heaving. His ship was half dead, but they were alive. He turned to see the children staring at him. The youngest smiled faintly, the blue glow gone from his skin. Daniel smiled back, whispering, "You're safe now." But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The Syndicate wouldn't stop. They had just declared war on one human, who had something worth fighting for. The Arcadia drifted in the shadow of an asteroid, its engines silent, its hull scorched and broken. Inside, the air was thin, lights dim, and Daniel Cross sat slumped in the cockpit, holding his shoulder where metal shards had cut deep. He had escaped the Syndicate's patrols. Barely. His ship was nearly dead, running on emergency power. But behind him in the med bay, 3 alien children slept peacefully for the first time since he'd met them. The cure had worked. But it had cost him almost everything. Daniel stared at the cracked display screen flickering in front of him. "Arcadia," he said weakly. "Status report." The ship's AI replied in her calm voice, though static broke her tone. "Main engines offline. Shields at 2%. Power reserves at 11 hours. Life support failing in 20. Daniel laughed softly. "So we're alive." But not for long. He stood, gripping the console for balance. Every muscle in his body ached, but he forced himself toward the med bay. Inside, the youngest child stirred, blinking open, bright, silver-blue eyes. His breathing was normal now. No glow under his skin, no pain. He looked at Daniel with confusion and whispered, "Safe?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid. You're safe." The child tilted his head. "Home?" Daniel froze. He didn't have an answer. Home? What did that even mean anymore? For them, their planet was gone. For him, Earth was light years away, and the Syndicate would never let him return. He sat beside the bed and sighed. "We'll find one," he said softly. "A place no one can hurt you again." The oldest girl, the one who'd helped him during the experiment, stood near the window, watching stars drift by. "Bad ships come back?" she asked. "Maybe," Daniel said. "But next time we'll be ready." She nodded slowly, understanding more than her young age should have allowed. Hours passed. Daniel scavenged through the ship, trying to repair the power relays with what little he had left. He patched the holes with metal scraps, whispered curses under his breath, and ignored the pain in his hands. When he opened a storage crate, he found a small silver flask, the whiskey he'd bought months ago back when life was simple. He turned it over in his fingers. It reminded him of Craval, the desperate alien father who had traded everything for a single drink. Daniel felt a sting of anger, then pity. He whispered to himself, "I understand now. What it cost to lose hope." He put the flask down and went back to work. Suddenly, the AI's voice interrupted him. "Incoming transmission detected. Origin Syndicate command vessel." Daniel froze. "They found us." The screen lit up with a cold mechanical voice. "Unregistered human vessel Arcadia. You are charged with unauthorized genetic modification and illegal possession of restricted life forms. Power down and prepare for destruction. Daniel's heart pounded. Arcadia, open a channel. The AI hesitated. They will trace. Do it! Daniel snapped. The channel opened. Daniel leaned toward the mic. Listen to me. These aren't weapons. They're children. You experimented on them and I cured them. I'm not surrendering them to monsters. There was a long silence. Then the voice replied, colder than before. Compassion is irrelevant. You interfered with syndicate property. Prepare to die. The transmission ended. Daniel slammed his fist on the console. Damn it! The children appeared behind him, frightened by his shout. The youngest grabbed his sleeve. They come? Daniel took a deep breath. Yes, but we'll fight. He looked around the ruined ship, knowing he couldn't win. But surrender was not an option, not after everything they'd survived. He rerouted the last of the ship's power into the shields. The Arcadia trembled. Outside, syndicate warships appeared like dark shadows against the stars. Their weapons glowed red, charging. The ship's AI spoke softly. Daniel, you cannot win this battle. I know, he said quietly. But maybe we can survive it. He turned to the children. Get in the cryopods. Don't open them until I say. The oldest girl shook her head. You come too. Daniel smiled sadly. Not this time. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached out, touching his face. Home, with you, he swallowed hard. Always. He sealed the pods one by one. The hum of their systems filled the ship. Then he turned to the controls, his mind racing. There was one last thing he could do. A power burst from the reactor that might blind the enemy sensors long enough to escape. It could also kill him. He whispered to himself. If this works, maybe hope's worth the price. Outside, the syndicate fired. Energy beams raced toward the Arcadia. Daniel hit the manual override. The reactor exploded with white-blue light, flooding the asteroid field. The syndicate ships lost their lock, their scanners overloaded. For a moment, everything vanished into blinding brilliance. When the light faded, the Arcadia was gone, only silence remained. Far away, deep in the wreckage of an asteroid cave, the Arcadia drifted, broken but alive. Inside, the cryopods glowed softly. Daniel lay on the floor near the reactor, barely conscious, his body burned and weak. He looked at the pods and smiled. You're safe. That's all that matters. As darkness closed in, his last thought was of the word that had carried him this far. Hope. And somewhere, across the stars, that word began to spread. Darkness surrounded the Arcadia. For hours, there was no sound except the faint hum of backup systems and the slow rhythm of Daniel Cross's breathing. When he finally woke, every part of his body hurt. His left arm was burned, his face covered with ash and dried blood. The control panels around him were shattered, the lights flickering weakly. He tried to stand but stumbled, grabbing the wall for support. Arcadia, he whispered. Status? The ship's AI responded in a cracked, faint voice. Core systems, unstable. Power reserves, 6%. Life support. Critical. Daniel coughed, his throat dry. Kids, where are the kids? The AI's soft blue light blinked. Cryopods intact, all 3 life signs stable. Relief washed through him. He dragged himself toward the med bay, ignoring the pain in his legs. The children slept peacefully inside the pods, bathed in soft white light. Their faces no longer glowed blue, no signs of sickness. The cure had worked completely. He placed a trembling hand on the glass. You made it. All of you. For a long moment he stood there in silence, but then the ship trembled just slightly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. That wasn't random movement. Something was pulling them. He limped to the cockpit. The navigation screen showed faint red dots, syndicate drones scanning the asteroid field. His stomach dropped. They found us. The AI confirmed his fear. Tracking signatures detected. Estimated interception in 15 minutes. Daniel cursed under his breath. We barely have enough power to move. He looked out the window. Huge rocks floated all around, spinning slowly in the darkness. The asteroid belt could hide them again, but only if he moved fast. He tapped the controls. Reroute every ounce of power to thrusters. The AI hesitated. That will disable life support. Daniel smirked tiredly. Then we'll just have to hold our breath. The ship groaned as the engines roared back to life. The Arcadia slipped between 2 massive asteroids, vanishing from the drone's sensors. For 10 long minutes, Daniel flew blind through the maze of drifting rock. One mistake, one collision, and the ship would be crushed to dust. Alarms beeped softly, warning of low oxygen. His vision blurred, but he didn't stop. Behind him, the AI spoke quietly. "Daniel, you cannot continue like this. Your injuries are severe." "I'll rest when they're safe," he muttered. Suddenly, the sensors flared red again. A Syndicate warship had entered the field, much larger, faster, and armed with plasma cannons. "They're locking on," the AI said. Daniel clenched his jaw. Not today. He steered sharply, weaving between asteroids. Explosions lit the dark as enemy fire struck the rocks around them. The Arcadia shook violently, metal screaming in protest. One blast hit the rear engine. Sparks flew. The ship spun out of control, smashing into smaller asteroids. Daniel gritted his teeth and slammed the stabilizers. The Arcadia steadied, but barely. "Hold together, girl," he whispered to his ship. "Just a little longer." He looked at the scanner and saw an escape route. A narrow tunnel through two massive rocks, barely wide enough for the Arcadia to fit. It was suicide to try, but he smiled. "Guess we're doing this the hard way." Inside the cryo bay, the eldest alien girl stirred awake. Her eyes glowed faintly as she looked around, sensing danger. She saw Daniel through the glass, hurt, struggling, but still fighting. Something inside her changed. She reached out her hand, touching the pod's window. The glow from her skin spread through the pod's circuits, linking with the ship's energy flow. The Arcadia's lights flickered and then stabilized. The AI's tone changed. "New power source detected. Unknown biological link." Daniel glanced at the readings and blinked. The children's bodies were generating energy, like living batteries connected to the ship. He laughed weakly. "Of course. You're saving me now." With the extra boost, the Arcadia shot forward, entering the narrow tunnel. Plasma blasts followed, hitting the asteroid walls and sending debris flying. The ship scraped against stone, sparks raining across the hull. Daniel pushed the throttle to maximum. Come on, come on." At the last second, the Arcadia burst out of the tunnel just as the Syndicate warship fired another blast, hitting the rock instead. The explosion was massive. The entire asteroid broke apart, destroying the warship in a burst of light. Silence followed. Only the Arcadia remained, floating among fragments of glowing dust. Daniel slumped back in his seat, exhausted. "We did it." The AI spoke softly. "Enemy signals lost. We are safe. For now," he smiled faintly. "That's all I needed to hear." He turned off the alarms and leaned back, closing his eyes. For the first time in weeks, peace filled the small ship. After a while, the eldest child's voice came from behind him. "We go home?" Daniel turned and smiled. "Yes, we find one, together." He stood and looked out the window at the stars ahead, countless worlds waiting. The Syndicate might still come, but it didn't matter. The Arcadia wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a promise, a home, a symbol of what one human could do when he refused to give up. As the ship drifted toward the light of a distant blue planet, Daniel whispered to himself, "Hope isn't something you find. It's something you build." And somewhere, deep in space, the Galactic Syndicate received a faint signal, an echo of forbidden technology mixed with a human voice. They would come again. But this time, the human wouldn't be running. The Arcadia drifted quietly through a golden sky. Below it stretched an untouched world, blue oceans, green fields, and silver mountains shining under two suns. Daniel Cross sat in the cockpit, his tired eyes staring at the horizon. For the first time in months, the radar was silent. No Syndicate signals, no danger. Just peace. He exhaled deeply. "We made it." Behind him, the alien children peered through the window, their eyes wide in wonder. They'd never seen clouds, trees, or sunlight before. The youngest pressed his glowing fingers to the glass, whispering a word Daniel couldn't understand. But he knew what it meant. Home. The Arcadia touched down on a grassy plain near a shimmering lake. When the ramp lowered, a warm breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh air. The children stepped out first, their small feet sinking into the soft earth. They laughed, really laughed, for the first time. Daniel followed, standing beneath the twin suns with his hands on his hips, his heart swelling. For a long moment, he just watched them run across the grass, chasing the wind, their laughter echoing across the open land. He smiled. "Yeah," he whispered. "You deserve this." Over the next few days, Daniel worked tirelessly to make the place livable. He scavenged materials from the ship and built shelters using whatever tech still worked. The eldest child helped him, mimicking his movements, learning fast. Together they built small homes, simple round structures made of ship panels and rock. The youngest gathered strange glowing flowers, planting them around the huts until the entire area looked alive with color. At night they'd sit around a fire, Daniel telling stories in simple English while the children listened with glowing eyes. They didn't understand every word, but they understood his tone, his warmth, his love. He told them about Earth, about blue skies and oceans, about music and laughter and the foolishness of humans who fought over everything, but still found beauty in small things. The oldest girl would listen most closely. One night she pointed to the stars and asked, "Your world there?" Daniel nodded. "Somewhere out there, yes," she tilted her head. "You go back?" Daniel looked into the fire, thinking. "No," he said softly. "I already found where I belong. Months passed. Seasons changed. The children grew stronger. Their strange alien biology adapted to the planet's air and water. They built new things, machines, farms, wind towers. Daniel watched proudly as they learned to build and fix better than he could. He called the place Haven, because it was more than a planet. It was a promise. One morning, he stood by the lake, his reflection rippling in the water. The eldest girl walked up beside him, now taller, wiser. "We live," she said proudly. "We grow," Daniel smiled. "You did. You all did." She hesitated, then added softly, "You, our father." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment he couldn't speak. He just nodded, blinking back tears. "I guess I am." She smiled and placed a glowing hand on his arm. "We name this world after you," he chuckled. "No, no, don't you dare." She laughed, a sound bright as sunlight, and ran off to join the others. Daniel looked at the horizon again, and this time, for the first time, he felt peace. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, the Arcadia's broken transmitter flickered to life. The AI's soft, damaged voice echoed through the camp. "Incoming transmission detected. Source unknown." Daniel frowned. "Unknown?" The signal came through as static at first, then a clear, cold voice. "Human vessel Arcadia. This is the Galactic Syndicate. We know you're alive." Daniel's blood ran cold. The children froze. The voice continued. "You defied our laws. You stole our property. But your cure, it has spread. Entire colonies are rebelling. You started something you cannot stop." Then the signal cut out. Daniel stared at the transmitter for a long moment, silent. The children looked at him with fear. He smiled slowly. "They're right." He turned to them, his eyes fierce but calm. "We didn't just survive. We changed everything." Weeks later, ships began appearing in the skies above Haven. Not syndicate warships, but refugees. Alien families, broken survivors, the sick and lost, all coming for help. Word had spread through the stars. There was a place where a human gave hope. Daniel and the children welcomed them. The small camp became a village, then a colony. He taught them all the same way he taught those first three: how to fix, how to grow, how to believe again. At night, the villagers would sit by the fires telling the story of the man who saved the dying children, who built a home when the galaxy had none left to give. They called him many names: Engineer of Hope, the Human Maker, Father of Haven. But Daniel never liked titles. He'd just smile and say, "I didn't save anyone. I just showed them how not to give up." Years later, when Daniel Cross grew old and gray, the children, now adults, stood around him. The eldest, now a leader of the new world, held his hand. "You gave us life," she said softly, "and a home." Daniel smiled weakly. "No," he whispered, looking at the glowing cities beyond the hills. "You gave me one." His eyes closed for the last time under the twin suns, and as his body rested, thousands of beings across the stars whispered his name, the human who defied the syndicate, who gave them hope and built a home where no law, no fear, and no hatred could ever touch them again.